The Speculations reading series, in what we think is its 23rd year. The co-production of Dreamhaven Books and SF Minnesota, a multicultural speculative fiction organization. It also runs a mid-summer convention, DiversiCon. Pass around for a sibling organization, Kyle Stone at a Western convention. It's time to address it. We're pleased for what I think is the first time used in the Speculation series.
Yep.
Scott Burtness. So take it away, Scott.
Hey, everybody. So I know probably like 2/3 of the room. I haven't met you yet. I'm Scott. Or have we met?
Mike? Probably.
Good to meet you. Scott, nice to meet you. So I'm a local author. I'm lightly involved with the Men's Spec Fiction Group. I've done a few events with them. And was pretty excited when Conrad offered to have me come out and read. I thought it would be for about 5 to 10 minutes. So it's a little bit longer than that. So I'm a local author, indie author. I have a trilogy that I self-published, and then I have a handful of short stories in various anthologies. My sort of main body of work is paranormal comedy. I write about bowling vampires, beer-guzzling werewolves. My zombie likes to watch Murder, She Wrote in Columbo. It's all set up in Wisconsin. Just a few friends going through some pretty odd adventures. My short stories have skewed a bit more toward like strange, dark science fiction and like unusual fiction. Future works, I'm not quite sure I'm going to land. If I'm going to stay more at the lighthearted horror comedy, or if I might, try and do a little bit more of the dark stuff. But I figured rather than reading from the books tonight, I would present a few of my short stories, just to kind of give you a sampler platter of the things that I enjoy. So the first thing I wanted to read is a short story in a troll-themed anthology, put together by an expat that lives in Turkey. All of the stories are either trolls, fairy tale trolls, or internet trolls. So you've got kind of a fun selection there. I use that as an opportunity to start to explore other parts of my world that my main books are in. So I wrote a story about the local bowling alley in a town called Trappersville, Wisconsin. And the owner of the bowling alley is about to have an unfortunate night. This is called Bay City Trollers. $1.50 a game, $2 for them shoes, Slow Johnson said. A thick Midwestern accent lent his words a folksy cadence, slow as his name implied. You bowl tree games, you get a fourth and for $1. Be quick about it though, I'm closing soon. While the pudgy, pimply teen worked to free a blue nylon wallet from his pocket, Johnson rubbed his bad leg and grimaced. It was the first new moon of winter, and his leg was letting him know. Ah, the damned ache must feed on bad memories, he grumbled to himself. Peeling Velcro heralded a $10 bill being placed on the countertop's flecked laminate. When Johnson reached for the money, the teenager pressed down and pinned it in place. You're Mr. Johnson, right? Put me on lane 30 and all of this is yours. Johnson's eyes widened in surprise. He needed to condemn someone to lane 30, no doubt about it. But he always made sure it was an undesirable type. Vikings fans, lactose-intolerant people that couldn't eat cheese curds, that sort of thing. Folks that just weren't needed up in the north woods of Wisconsin. The trouble was, it had been a quiet night, and prospects were thin. The townsfolk in Trapperville knew not to go bowling on the night of winter's first new moon, and Johnson always made sure that decent-looking Scotties who happened by were sent firmly on their way. Sure, someone needed to bowl on lane 30, but it didn't have to be this kid. Did it? Johnson wondered. Are you lactose intolerant? He asked, to which the teen replied with a confused shake of his head. Vikings fan? He tried. The teen shook his head again and let an emphatic, no way, go Packers! Johnson glowered in response and looked at the clock on the wall. There was still time, barely, but still. Forcing an apologetic shrug, he said, oh, lane 30, that one's down for fixin'. Wide eyes and a round face looked up at Johnson, clearly distraught but trying not to show it. The teen's voice cracked as he stammered, but it can't be. It's really important that I bowl in lane 30. Super important, and it has to be tonight. Silence stretched like gum from a shoe heel until Johnson whispered, so you know about the lane 30? The teen gave an eager nod. Yes, sir. I'm pledging for a fraternity, and this is my last challenge. Head up to Bay City Bowlers on the night of winter's first new moon. Bowl a game on lane 30. And if I do that, he said, vibrating with excitement, I am instantly a full-fledged brother. Johnson swallowed hard and moved the sudden lump of guilt from his throat to his stomach. It didn't feel much better there, but at least he could talk again. You're a frat boy? He asked, disbelieving. Yep. Well, I will be once I finish up here. I'm going to be in Theta Chi, the teen replied, and then burst into an impromptu song. See the brothers standing proud, hear their voices clear and loud, none before and none hereafter are better than my Theta Chi chapter. Indecision paralyzed the bowling alley's owner. He'd never liked frat boys, so a few years ago he'd started the rumor. A group of them were up from some frat or other in Milwaukee, Alpha Sigma Mu, Kappa Beta Tau, hell if he could remember and hell if it mattered. What mattered is that they were loud, obnoxious, and had stolen a few beers from the karaoke bar. Fed up, Johnson had stopped by their lane and made an offhand comment about the troll that lived in the bowling alley. It only came out one night a year, he'd said. On that night, if someone brave enough bowled a game on lane 30, that troll would either give them a precious gemstone or eat them. While only half true, the story had worked. Every year when the moon was dark and winter was in the air, some frat brat managed to find his way up to the town of Trappersville on a dare. If there weren't any Vikings fans handy, Johnson would put them on lane 30, and the town would be safe for another year. Usually, Johnson would be ecstatic when some mouthy little chump with a flipped-up collar walked in on the right night. But this kid? He was different. He seemed nice. Not a meathead, not a cocky little jerk. And yeah, his collar was flipped up, but still, he seemed like a decent enough kid. Mistaking the reason for Johnson's silence, the pledge blushed and blurted out, I know, it's a dumb song. They make us sing it all the time, though, and it does kind of grow on you after a while. No, it's a great song, and that's a fact, Johnson sputtered. He managed before words failed him. Shaking his head, he tried a different tact. I'll put you on the lane 13. That's plenty scary, don't you think? He asked hopefully, only to have his hopes dashed again when the teen adamantly shook his head. Cody, he's our chapter president, said it specifically had to be lane 30, the pledge said earnestly, because that's where the troll is. Shh, Johnson snapped. Don't just go around saying it. Only a damn fool does that. The kid recoiled like a kicked puppy, making Johnson feel like he was the troll. Chagrined but still determined, he tried again to dissuade the insistent frat pledge. You got a family, boy? Parents? Brothers or sisters? The pledge looked down at the countertop and after a quiet moment hooked his thumbs in the straps of his backpack and shook his head. No, sir, it's just me. My folks died in an accident, he explained, and then immediately brightened. But that's okay. Theta Chi, they're going to be my new family. I even told Cody that I won't stop at just being a brother. I'm going to be the next chapter president. With an even wider smile, he added, and when I am, I'm putting him on the bathroom detail after all the parties. Well, a girl then, Johnson persisted with growing vehemence. You know, someone that would miss you, should you go missing? Because missing's what you're going to be, he yelled, if you bowl on the lane 30. Whether it was his words or the gruff intensity behind them, it had the desired effect. The pledge visibly blanched and looked down the lanes worriedly, but then caught himself and laughed. Jeez, he said with a tenuous smile, you really had me going for a second, you and Cody. But come on, I'm not stupid, there's no troll. It's just a silly dare. Callous hands rubbed stubbled cheeks as Johnson tried to decide what to do. The night was getting on, and he had to find someone to bowl on lane 30. While Johnson vacillated, the pledge reached into his backpack and retrieved a wadded-up bundle of white paper. Don't worry, though. I still brought everything, just like Cody told me to. You should have seen the look on the butcher's face. Not many people asking for one of these, I guess. Fingers trembling with excitement, the pledge carefully unfolded the paper to display a severed goat's foot. Before Johnson could react, the kid dove back into his backpack again and pulled out a tiny pair of baby booties. They're legit, too, he said with a proud flourish. I got them from a girl in my biology class. Her older sister just had a kid. Here, smell them. They smell like baby. Johnson glanced nervously toward the shadows piled up at the far end of the alley. Even the pale glow from the fluorescent light seemed to cringe away from lane 30. When he returned his gaze to the goat's foot and baby booties, the fight went out of him sudden as air from a burst balloon. You don't know you're here, then. You made damn sure of that, Johnson said softly. Sorry, kid. I guess you're bowling on the lane 30. What size shoes? After passing a pair of worn size 9s over the counter and flipping the switch for lane 30, Johnson watched the pledge practically skip to the farthest corner of the alley. Well, maybe it's a blessing, he thought, trying to dispel his guilt. Kid obviously don't got a lick of sense. Despite his efforts, the stubborn guilt stayed put. It chewed on Johnson's insides like a troll with a bone and sucked out dark memories like marrow. He remembered when his grandpa first read him Three Billy Goats Gruff. Johnson recalled laughing at the old folk tale until Grandpa had spanked him and said it was no laughing matter. Over the years, more than a few of his bedtime stories were about trolls. The gruesome tales would leave him cowering under his blankets, waiting for the inevitable troll under his bed to gnash its teeth and gobble him up. After Johnson's grandpa passed away, his pop kept up with the troll stories. By the time Johnson was a teenager, he could recite most of them from memory and often did when helping at the bowling alley. His pop would ask Johnson to tell a story and then grill him on the details afterward. Johnson didn't mind. It helped pass the time when oiling the lanes or disinfecting shoes, but he never thought to ask why he had to know so many troll stories. Just like he never thought to ask why he wasn't allowed at the bowling alley on the first new moon of winter. Johnson was a senior in high school when he learned the horrible truth of things. His pop was working at the bowling alley and had forgotten to bring supper. Always the good son, Johnson decided to pack one up and drive it over. It was early winter, the air held out promise of a hard freeze, and the new moon cut a black silhouette against the slate-gray sky. But when he arrived at the alley, lunch pail in hand, his old pop's Buick was the only car in the lot. A heavy dusting of snow turned Johnson's footsteps into wetly crunching whispers as he trudged towards the alley's entrance. The open sign was flipped to close, but the glass doors were unlocked. Once inside, Johnson found the alley as lifeless as the parking lot. Usually there'd be at least a few families watching their kids bounce balls off the bumper buddies, or some pros practicing their hooks. That night, however, Bay City bowlers had been empty as a keg after game day. The fluorescent lights were out, and the lanes were as dark as the moonless sky. A handful of track lights were on, but they created more pockets of shadow than light. Peering through the gloom, Johnson thought he saw someone move at the farthest end of the bowling alley. He called out hello and waved, but there was no response. Curious, he made his way down the lanes, calling out for his pop as he went. Still the shadowy figure didn't reply. It wasn't until he was almost at lane 30 that he realized that the shadow couldn't be his pop. The shape wasn't right. The shape was actually all wrong. Too big, too uneven, too inhuman. He squinted and asked who was there. The voice that answered did not belong to his pop. Oath and vow, pledge and pact. Keep me fed or I'll find a snack. Once a year, tasty treat. Methinks I've found the one I'll eat. The shadow was on him before he could blink. Rough hands grabbed his ankles, and a wide mouth found his leg. A primal sound full of terror and pain erupted from Johnson's throat. The last thing he saw before he passed out was his pop running toward him, yelling and waving his arms. The first thing he saw when he came to was a wetly gleaming skull sitting on lane 30's ball return. Ignoring the horrible agony in his ruined leg, Johnson crawled toward the skull. A piece of paper crinkled under his palm. A hastily scribbled note in his pop's handwriting. An unfinished note whose words dragged him back to when he was a little kid hiding under his blankets after one of Grandpa's stories. Son, I've been meaning to tell you everything for so long. I just kept hoping you'd get a few more years on you before I did. It's a curse, a damned curse, one that's haunted us Johnsons for generations. Your grandpop tried to leave it behind, but the damn thing followed him over on the boat from Norway. We drove it out of a root cellar with mistletoe, drove it out of a woodshed with church bells. But when the damn thing got into the ball pit of lane 30, it stayed. We've tried to kill it, sun lamps, dynamite, even found an honest-to-God troll hunter. Fellow lasted longer than most, but not by much. I'm telling you this so you know we tried. Tried every damn thing we knew, but nothing worked. The troll has to stay fed. Once every year. If we don't do that, it'll go hunting in town and snatch up all of our friends and neighbors one by one. And us Johnsons can't let that happen, not ever. So we do what we have to do. And year after year we've done it. Not willingly, not proudly, but year after year, us Johnsons have kept the town safe. Trouble is, no one came in tonight. No one's here. So I have to do what's right. I love you, son, and I'm sorry. This is your burden now. On the first new moon of winter, someone has to bowl on lane 30. The mayor will make sure the townsfolk stay away, and when it's over, the sheriff will make sure there aren't any complications. Remember the stories we raised you on, and always make sure it's someone... The funeral was 2 weeks later. The casket they put in the ground at First Lutheran Small Cemetery held only a skull, and when the bill came, it was marked, with deepest gratitude, paid in full. Clattering pins brought Johnson out of his tortured reverie. A voice followed with a gleeful, "Ha! Strike! Hey, Mr. Johnson, I got a strike!" The frat pledge waved from the distance. Johnson impulsively waved back before dropping his hand to the countertop. The guilt he had left gnawing at his insides reared up and sank ragged teeth deep into his heart. Flipped-up collar or not, that pledge couldn't have been much older than Johnson had been that fateful night long years before. Just a kid, really. A regular kid. A kid that no one would miss, he reminded himself sternly. No one except Slow Johnson. Sudden decision straightened his back and clenched his jaw. His leg ached something fierce, but Johnson pushed himself to his feet and limped through the pain. Past the counter and onto the loudly patterned carpet, Past the karaoke bar, saloon-style doors, and the cigarette machine, he had just passed lane 17 when he heard the voice. A low and rotten voice that sounded like a boat's belly scraping up on the rocks. A voice that belonged in all the tales he'd been raised on. A voice he'd first heard the night he lost his pop. And a voice he'd been forced to hear every year since. Oath and vow, pledge and pact. Johnson pushed his bad leg to move faster. Lane 18 passed, then 19. Keep me fed or I'll find a snack. Lane 20, lane 21. Johnson's breath came in ragged gasps. Sucking air, he yelled a warning, but the kid was transfixed by the shadows that staggered and lurched their way up the lane. Bones to gnaw, yummy meat. Johnson's heart pounded. His palms were soaked with sweat. His leg burned with a winding fire and his spine had gone to ice. Lane 28 passed, then 29. Once a year, he gets a treat. His bad leg gave out and Johnson fell hard to the floor. An anguished wail escaped his lips. One hand reached toward the terrified boy only a few feet away. The other pounded the ground in impotent fury. For a long time, Johnson lay where he was, leg throbbing and uncharacteristic tears streaming down his stubbled cheeks. Ignoring the agony in his leg, he pushed himself to his feet and limped the final distance to lane 30. After collapsing into a brightly colored, molded plastic chair, Johnson sat, defeated and still. "Town's safe because of you, not me," he whispered. "And you're going to be missed, boy. You know that, don't you?" The skull, looking back from the ball return, had no reply. I like sad endings. So again, that story is set in the bowling alley. That's featured pretty prominently in my first book. And I think over the years, I'll probably assemble a collection of short stories set in that world. Kind of a fun way to, over the years. Sorry. But yeah, it's just kind of fun to grab onto those smaller characters and do some new stuff with them. The second story I wanted to read is very different. This one is science fiction. It's in the Scarecrow anthology published by World River Press. This anthology is part of a series of anthologies. All the books are inspired by a different mythical creature. So that was really the whole submission guideline was it has to be Scarecrow themed. Spec fiction, Scarecrow themed. So do what you want with your Scarecrow, do what you want with your world, have at it. So for inspiration, obviously I went with Wizard of Oz, and I think it's called the Prime Directive in Star Trek, where you're not supposed to have any influence on the culture that you maybe intersect with. So this story is called If I Only Had an Autogenic Cognitive Decision Matrix. I was so ready to read one story. Three more. Go. All right. Scarecrow settled heavily into the modified seat, causing structural reinforcements to groan with stress. Clots of mud and foliage stained with dark vital fluid marked its path from the airlock. Initiating a physical assessment scan, it analyzed the extent of its injuries and categorized them by degree of severity. Despite openly weeping vital fluid, none were terminal, nor were any severe enough to degrade its capabilities. Shifting its awareness, Scarecrow observed Jory, the human wet tech assigned as its Tin Man. The human's posture, facial expressions, and biosignatures indicated that he also did not believe Scarecrow's wounds to be severe. Applying the relevant preloaded decision matrix, it determined that updating the Dorothy took precedence and established the communication link. Scarecrow to mining site. It formed the words slowly, hindered by facial muscles not really well shaped for consortium standard. Mission accomplished. Roger, Scarecrow, the human female assigned as their unit's Dorothy acknowledged over the comm. Tin Man, please verify. Scarecrow noted that the audio quality of the comlink was slightly squelched, the result of a typically strong Van Allen belt in the heavy metals-rich moon. To facilitate optimal communication, Scarecrow adjusted the audio controls as the human male spoke. Confirm mission accomplished, the wet tech verified, running a hand through sweat-dampened hair. Sealing the airlock door and prepping for transit, he continued his update for the Dorothy's mission log. Deterrent successful, taboo zone perimeter intact. 2 crow fatalities, unprovoked and unavoidable. Scarecrow sustained injuries, but none of them seem severe. We're prepped for return and I'll initiate repairs in transit. Estimated time of arrival? The Dorothy queried. Well, Genevieve, I'm glad you asked, the Tin Man replied. Scarecrow, how long to base? Scarecrow considered variables, mentally calling up and discarding numerous potentialities that could affect travel time. Transport will arrive at base in 37 local minutes, it vocalized. watching closely for its Tin Man's reaction. The human smiled and engaged the transport's auto-navigation system. Applying a physiological emotional reduction algorithm it had developed, Scarecrow cross-referenced the smile with its iconic database of 248 others from its Tin Man. Analysis indicated the human was pleased. The near-subsonic drone of anti-gravity cyclers spinning up introduced a dissonant chord into the otherwise quiet cabin. Scarecrow monitored the noise, knowing that the sound would resolve into harmonic waveforms as they synced with the moon's gravitational fields. And a moment later, the small craft rose in the forest floor and accelerated through the trees, accompanied by a soft hum. Coarse, dark leaves and thin, supple branches whispered along the transport's canopy as they passed. Scarecrow cataloged the sounds in a sensory somatic database its Tin Man had recently added, archiving them for future contemplation. Acknowledged, the Dorothy responded. ETA 37 local minutes, full debrief scheduled for local 1830, mission log complete. The comlink chimed twice to signal that the recording had stopped. Scarecrow was about to disconnect when the Dorothy spoke again. Jory, would you care to explain why you're teaching the Scarecrow navigational computations? The human female asked. And more importantly, what happened out there? Data feed was showing a textbook perfect spook job. The Tin Man had placed a suture stapler, antiseptic gel, and a heavy roll of synth on a floating tray, and motioned for Scarecrow to extend its right-wing analog. Scarecrow stretched the limb as directed, careful to avoid bumping the tray, and 2.5 meters of corded muscle and functional joints unfolded, terminating in a sharp claw. The length of the limb was covered with black, overlapping, exocutaneous growths, blade like feathers. The growths covered Scarecrow's entire body, except for the lower half of its thick legs and wide claws that were rapidly spaced and densely spaced rigid scales. Bioengineered to resemble the moon's indigenous sentient race, Scarecrow considered its appearance. The semblance of black feathers, clawed feet, and beak-like mouths gave rise to the crow moniker used by humans to describe the aliens. But any resemblance to the Corvidae family found on most of the Earth-derived planets ended there. Scarecrow's research had informed it that the crows of this moon shared no parallel evolutionary traits with any type of aviary analog species cataloged by the consortium of scientists. And Scarecrow also knew that, while similar, it was not typical of the indigenous species. The Dorothy xenanthropology team had discovered religious iconography depicting the crow's deity, and then the wet tech had designed Scarecrow accordingly. Standing over 3 meters tall and weighing about 300 kilograms, it was a full 1.5 meters taller than the average adult crow. Turning its head, Scarecrow inspected the jagged tear in the growth stretching along its ulna bone to its carpal joint. When the Tin Man picked up the suture stapler, a memory of previous repairs surfaced. Analyzing the retrieved sensory data, it disabled its pain receptors and returned its attention to the conversing humans. Scare's learning navigational computations because he's really, really smart. Now, to answer your other question, the problem could be that we're writing the damn textbook as we go, the Tin Man stated. In a nutshell, Jen, the crows didn't spook. Scare went through the protocol script, forbidden land, stay away, fire and brimstone, whatever, and you definitely got the language right. The crows all quivered and kowtowed. Unfortunately, this time they didn't scatter. The Tin Man started working his way around Scarecrow, suture stapler clicking and hissing. Scarecrow registered an acrid smell as the hot suture singed his torn flesh. While the rest were face down in the dirt, one big warrior crow suddenly lunged, ripped out another crow's heart, and offered it up to Scarecrow. The others started to scream, making this weird, ululating sound that I've never heard them make before, and next thing you know, they're swaying back and forth, fanning their limbs while the big one held up the heart. Since that behavior wasn't defined in the event response parameters, Scare didn't do anything, it just stood there. The big crow must have been offended because it threw down the heart and attacked. When it was over, Scarecrow repeated the protocol script, and the rest of the crows finally fled. Scarecrow noticed the tonal similarities between the Dorothy's slow exhalation and the sound of leaves across the canopy. It saved the comparison for future examination and continued listening. When the human female spoke, her words came faster than before. Jory, that's amazing. We suspected they engaged in ritual sacrifice, but we haven't had a chance to see it yet. You might have witnessed a genuine expiatory rite. Or not. I mean, it's possible it didn't signify atonement. Do you think the sounds they were making were actually relating, or could it have been more like singing or praise? I mean, were they distraught, or could it have been joy? I mean, they did just meet their god. Demonstrating worship and devotion with the physical offering of a heart, that's pretty consistent across xenocultures that are at this stage of mythic, literal, religious evolution. The Dorothy exhaled again. Scarecrow noted the difference from her earlier sigh. Since awakening in the vitro vat, it had collected 116 samples of contextual size from humans. Each sample allowed it to refine its algorithms and extrapolate from a greater range of cognitive and emotional states as expressed by exhalations of breath. The Scarecrow associated Dorothy's first exhalation with anticipation and excitement. The latter, it associated with frustration or anxiety. Of course, it could be a localized reaction to the Scarecrow, the Dorothy continued more slowly. Maybe we've instigated a previously non-existent religious ceremony. I mean, it's possible that the crows nearest to the taboo zone only started making sacrifices now that their god is showing up in the flesh. You're welcome, the Tin Man said. Jory, this is serious. Consortium Brass will be furious if they think that we've artificially influenced their social evolution. And you know the rules. We have permission to get in, get the metals out of this little moon, and get out. But there can be zero social technological influence. No indigenous contact besides the Scarecrow. And even that should be as infrequent as possible, just enough to enforce the taboo zone and keep them away from the mine. I'll need the holovid as soon as you're back so I can update the event's response parameters. And if Scarecrow gets caught up in a similar ritual, I don't know what the appropriate response should be. No, it beats me, Jen. You're the Xeno shrink, I'm just a wet tech, the Tin Man commented. Maybe we could talk about it over dinner? Scarecrow's sensitive olfactory passages noted an increase in pheromones from the human male. Intrigued by the event, it scanned a human reproductive biology file and determined that it was ineffective for the human male to release the chemical signature when the human female was not in physical proximity. Also, there were no estrogen pheromones present that would have elicited a response from the human male's hypothalamy. Scarecrow concluded that more data would be required before it could start to assemble an appropriate situational assessment algorithm. Shifting its bulk to allow the Tin Man an easier access to a gash on its side, it continued to capture the conversation for future review. I'm a xenanthropologist, not a xeno-shrink, the Dorothy replied. Cultural norms, social and religious development, that's plenty, thanks. Somebody else can figure out their individual psyches. And I'm not sure I want to discuss alien ritual sacrifice while eating. After dinner? The Tin Man asked. Jory. Or after dinner? Like after barracks go lights out? The Dorothy spoke again, her voice echoing slightly as the comm-link channel wavered. You're persistent, I'll give you that, but no, Jory, look, you know the rules about fraternizing on assignment. The Tin Man stopped mid-stitch. So you're saying if we weren't on assignment? Jory, enough, the Dorothy replied. Just get me that holovid as soon as you dock. A sudden chime indicated the terminated comlink. Tin Man dropped his head and sighed. I thought girls liked flowers. Looking up, he pointed a finger at Scarecrow's 3 eyes. You should talk to her more, the human suggested before returning to the sutures. Your lexicon is the most expansive of any AI that I've ever worked on, and that would definitely impress her. Mission outcome conveyed, the Scarecrow stated, eliciting a short laugh from its Tin Man. Sure it was, and nicely done, too. Mission accomplished, beautifully descriptive, despite its brevity. Finishing the final sutures, the human swabbed on some antiseptic gel, stretched a few layers of sin skin over the wounds, and surveyed his work. Jen thinks AIs could never deviate from core purpose parameters. If you chatted her up, actually engaged in autonomous, non-mission dialogue, she'd see that crows aren't the only interesting, intelligent life form on this moon. Repairs finished, the human anchored the tray and returned the contents to the med locker. Scarecrow made a gesture for confused, clarify, turning his head to follow the Tin Man as he removed his fluid-stained coveralls and placed them in Transport's recycler. Your enhancements. The cognitive psychology templates, the self-generating sub-databases, seed algorithms, ad hoc decision matrices. You're my grand experiment, Scarecrow, the Tin Man said. Remember when I showed you the Wizard of Oz? Scarecrow nodded. Earth Prime Holovid. Fiction. Inspiration for occupational designations, Dorothy. Tin Man. Scarecrow, it said in response, indicating the transport's comm speaker, the Tin Man's chest, and its own torso in sequence. Well, there's a bit more to it than that. For a moment, the wet tech was occupied with documenting his repairs and updating the medlocker inventory. Turning back to face Scarecrow, he pointed with his stylus. Let's just say that I'm trying to help you get a brain because I'm in search of a heart. Query. Why does Tin Man require additional chambered muscular organ? Is original unit defective or impairing operational effectiveness? The human shook his head. It looks like we need to work on your figurative literal conversions. Jory looked at Scarecrow from his chair. Consider that crow ritual that you just experienced. It wasn't giving you a heart because it thought that yours was in disrepair. A heart's also symbolic. To have someone's heart is to have their devotion, their love. When Scarecrow didn't respond, the human continued, After we debrief, I'll schedule a programming session on similes, analogies, metaphors, and idioms. That should help inform your contextual interpretation algorithms. Go ahead, store this conversation and we can reference it later. Rather than storing the conversation for future review, Scarecrow kept it active for immediate contemplation. As they traversed the moon's forest toward the mine site, Scarecrow sat quietly considering what he had learned. After precisely 37 local minutes of travel time, Scarecrow watched a large slab of natural stone shudder as servo pistons pushed and lifted away a side of the mountain. Sliding on pneumatic gliders, it moved sideways, opening a previously hidden tunnel. Scarecrow listened to the anti-gravity cyclers wind down as the transport slowed and came to a stop. The Tin Man tripped the airlock and stepped down to the transport bay's floor, while Scarecrow exited more slowly, bending slightly to accommodate the airlock's size. Despite the muted sounds of the mining operations, Scarecrow felt the ever-present vibrations beneath its clawed feet as it followed the Tin Man to where the Dorothy was waiting. Recalling its Tin Man's earlier instructions, it formulated a statement. "Hello, Genevieve," Scarecrow vocalized. Scarecrow will learn figurative literal conversion following debrief. The human female turned to Scarecrow, facial expression altering as she reacted to its self-initiated dialogue. Shifting its awareness to the human male, Scarecrow noted that the widening smile on its Tin Man's face. Analysis of the smile indicated that its cognitive actions were in conformance with the Tin Man's objectives. Scarecrow enabled a newly developed autogenic decision matrix. Stepping forward, it extended a limb and grasped the Dorothy's shoulder. Applying pressure to immobilize her, Scarecrow thrust its other claw forward, piercing the human female's chest. Expanding its digits, it snapped the breastbone and wrenched open her ribcage, allowing it to completely encase the small heart within its claw's grip. A sharp twist, and the tissue anchoring the chambered organ within the chest cavity tore free. As the Tin Man screamed his joy, Scarecrow captured the event response, validated the preceding logic chain, and offered up the Dorothy's devotion and love. It is a little warm in here. Do we have time for a short break if folks want to step outside and get a little blast of air? Or is everyone hanging tough?
Eric?
Wow.
For Minnesota.
I was going to say. So just planning ahead.
We brought one for all of us.
Yeah, right?
I'm sorry.
All right.
It's not distracting.
I think. Trying to decide if I want to leave you guys on a happy note or a creepy note.
Creepy.
Creepy? Okay.
I didn't realize there was a choice.
Oh yes, there's always a choice. If I can find the start of the story. Nope. So the next story that I'd like to read.
Should have numbered your pages.
Yeah, I absolutely should have. Wow, I should have actually printed the first page of the story. All right.
You mean you haven't memorized them?
Yeah. So the next story I'd like to read is actually from that troll anthology I was talking about. It's a fun little book. And again, I took it as an opportunity to dive into my world, but this time instead of picking a character featured in one of my books, I decided to introduce a new character, a little half troll, half ogre. He's cute. He's adorable.
So what's the difference?
That is not my story. All right. One more second here. There it is. All right, so Melvin, half troll, half ogre, is heading in to celebrate the winter solstice with his little monster buddies that live in Wisconsin. So kind of interesting timing since we're almost at summer solstice. This one's called the Potluck. Melvin chewed a ragged nail with yellow teeth and paced a fresh trail through the snow. Moonlight cast his gray shadow on the white ground, a lumpy and irregular shadow that he was fiercely proud of. He was small for a troll and even smaller for an ogre, but he was as ill-formed as the best of them. He'd even grown another hump over his left shoulder, a sure sign that he was an adult now. They'd have to take him seriously this year. A small stone bounced off his new hump and pulled the trollger from his worries. Melvin turned to greet the first arrival with a crooked smile. Pebble, a rock-tossing gnome from Fivefield, was nothing if not punctual and had uncanny aim when it came to his profession. "You still got it, eh?" Melvin joked. "I can hit a sparrow from 30 yards, the gnome announced with a wink. "But birds are never as much fun as people. They just flap and fall. Humans scream and run around. Much funnier." A chortle started in Melvin's lopsided belly, but quickly died in his pustuled tongue. Before he could give voice to a warning, a shadowy form grabbed the small gnome by the head and lobbed him across the clearing. Snow muffled the resulting thud, but not the string of curses that followed. "Maybe manners don't count for squat and elkhorn, but they do here," Pebble spat as he raked snow and twigs from his unruly hair. The beast of Bray Road's chuckle turned into a short howl. "Now you know how the rocks feel," he growled, wolfish eyes glinting in the moonlight. "Leave it," a new and terrible voice advised. "It's solstice. No one wants a tussle." Grinning, Melvin turned to watch the hodag make its ponderous way into the clearing. His gnome friend was ugly as rough-hewn granite, and the werewolf struck fear into the most stalwart of hearts, but the hodag was truly spectacular. Its toadish head swung to and fro, bull horns scraping deep gouges in the trunks of nearby trees, and a spiked tail left wide swaths of cleared snow in its wake. Too many teeth in a steam shovel mouth gleamed as it spoke, each word punctuated by the jutting of a thick and forked tongue that set pearlescent drops of spittle sizzling in the snow. "Good evening, Melvin, Pebble, Beast," the hodag offered politely, nodding to each monster in turn. "The rest should be here soon, and then we'll get started." Melvin's grin faltered as he swallowed and nodded. While the beast licked at his nappy pelt, and the hodag settled its scaled belly comfortably into a low drift, Pebble used his stubby finger to draw a series of concentric circles in the snow and waved his friend over. They divvied up a collection of small rocks from Pebble's pocket, and then passed the time flicking them into the circles, alternately cheering each other's misses and cursing each other's bullseyes. Over the next 15 or 20 minutes, the rest of the solstice revelers arrived. The pale vampire of Graceland Cemetery ghosted into the clearing and offered his friends a deep bow. Molly, one of the Devil Lake Monster's short-tail relatives, slithered up complaining about the fresh coat of ice over the Wolf River's slow-moving water. Gumbaroo was heard long before he was seen, his hippopotamus size and infectious laugh making stealth impossible, while the hide-behind was only heard, his cordial greeting drifting into the clearing from behind some tree or other. Soon, a whole myriad of monsters that called Wisconsin home had settled into a crude circle that ringed the clearing. "Jorge? Anyone seen Jorge?" the hodag asked, swinging its massive head from side to side. "That little goat sucker is always late," Wendigo complained, shaking its borrowed head. At that moment, the chupacabra in question leapt out from behind a wide log and scared Wendigo near out of its borrowed skin. When the assorted monsters laughed and the evil spirits scowled, the dog-like demon settled in between an old hag and a large troll, hairless tail wrapped around his cloven feet. "Hola, hodag," Jorge offered. "Melvin, Pebble, Beast," he continued, tipping his reddened snout to each monster. "Molly, Gum, que pasa? Senor Vampiro, always nice to see you. Ted, Lacey." A whiff of foul stench followed the hodag's abrupt exhalation. "Yes, yes, Jorge, everyone is here. Now, if you don't mind..." The bane of every goat in a 5-county area wiggled his tail and sniffed in embarrassment. Satisfied that he had everyone's attention, the hodag spoke. "Winter solstice," it began in a voice not unlike an iron bar scraping across a brick wall. "It's not just another night. It's our night. Our most revered and special night." While the others nodded, the hodag continued. "Night is our friend, our protector. She gathers us under the deep folds of her dark skirts and shields us from harm. So it's only right that we gather together to celebrate her when she's in her fullest splendor." Melvin found himself nodding along with the others. The hodag was right. If it wasn't for the night, not a one of them would be safe. Suppressing a shiver, he glanced east to where a particular rock formation still stood on a low hill. The Trollger's mom had so loved Melvin's dad that she often acted just like an ogre, willingly forgetting the common sense that kept trolls alive. One ill-fated Tuesday a few years back, she dallied too long while hunting rabbits, and late night slipped into early morning. When Melvin's dad discovered his stony bride the following evening, he crawled into the deepest cave he could find and had never returned. And just like that, Melvin was orphaned. After his mom's petrification and dad's disappearance, the little Trollger's only companion was loneliness. Neither troll nor ogre are overly social creatures, but neither do they want to be alone all the time. So Melvin took to roaming far and wide and met all manner of creatures. With their help, he learned how to stomp and stalk, how to intimidate and terrify. A helpful troll in Milwaukee taught him scary limericks to hurl at humans trying to cross a bridge, and a cordial ogre from the Bear Caves Natural Park gave him a few baubles and gemstones to help him start his own hoard. Each new monster he met was happy to share a tip or a trick, and Melvin was a quick study. Neither troll nor ogre He excelled at being both, until one fateful decision changed everything. The Trollger had been walking through the woods and admiring the heavy moon when he stumbled across a fox den. A small fox had barked and snapped and glared and sank its teeth into Melvin's thick fingers whenever he tried to grab her. He was about to go look for a heavy stick when he spied the litter. The fox he'd been determined to gobble up was protecting her kits. Melvin thought of all those little foxes growing up without their mom, and right then and there swore he would never eat an animal again. His decision had felt so noble, so right, but it didn't take long for rumors to find their way back to his bulbous ears. Melvin was strange. Melvin was odd. Melvin was vegetarian. "So let's make this the best winter solstice potluck ever," the Hodag proclaimed, ending his prepared remarks and pulling Melvin out of his recollections. The monsters hooted and howled and clapped their various appendages, and then quickly settled into planning. "Goat. I will of course bring goat," Jorge announced. "There's a nice sinewy fisherman that still comes down to the river to ice fish," Molly the lake monster commented. "I expect he'll be wonderfully chewy." "I saw a newborn babe at a nearby farm," Wendigo added, "plump like you wouldn't believe." One by one, each of the monsters offered to bring a course for the annual celebratory meal. Graceland Cemetery's vampire had been stalking a particular young lady. The beast knew of a well-stocked hen house. Gumbaroo promised to herd a few deer to the feast, and the hide-behind figured that he could even trick some local teenagers into stumbling onto the dinner table. With each new suggestion, Melvin felt himself collapse even further into despair. When the Hodag turned two burning eyes his way, the young Trollger nearly fainted. "And you, Melvin?" the Hodag asked in a polite, pointed if still polite tone. Well, this was it. This was the moment. Melvin straightened his back and raised his crooked chin. "Well," he began with a squeak. After loudly clearing his throat, he started again. "As you can all see, I have a new hump." There were mutters of appreciation and even a bashful blinking of heavy eyelashes from one of the more attractive trolls. Emboldened, Melvin plowed ahead. "So well, as an adult and all that, well, I'm going to bring asparagus, and kale, and potatoes with chives and celery, and some apples, nicely baked with cinnamon and nutmeg, and a delicious jackfruit. If you haven't had jackfruit, you absolutely have to try jackfruit. It's like pineapples and mangoes and bananas all at once, and it's a great source of fiber." Peals of laughter pounded Melvin's ears. Jorge rolled onto his back, cloven hoofs kicking in the winter air. The Wendigo's borrowed skin was literally splitting, so forceful were his guffaws. The beast of Bray Road howled at the moon and slapped his hairy knees with his massive paws. Of all the gathered monsters, only Pebble wasn't laughing. The little gnome's eyes met Melvin's and glistened like gemstones in the rain. "I was going to bring some quartz cakes and limestone bars," the gnome offered, but only Melvin heard. Rubbing at his new hump self-consciously, he turned and walked from the clearing, lumpy head hung low, and feet leaving deep irregular prints in the snow. "Now, Melvin," the Hodag's voice called after him. "It's solstice. Don't be like that." But Melvin just pushed his legs harder. The shame and anger that boiled deep in his gut would have normally sent him to his cave where he'd sulk and pout for days. But this night, however, his legs took him in a new direction. Realizing he had a destination, took the spark of an idea and built it up into a fine blaze. It warmed him from the inside, like curry over carrots and brown rice. It filled him up with energy, like a kale and pomegranate salad with couscous on the side. This winter solstice, they would have a new feast, whether the others knew it or not. The nearest town to the monsters' gathering place was called Trappersville, a tiny town that draped the Wisconsin woods like a castaway shawl. Melvin didn't go to town often, and when he did, it was usually on an occasion like St. Patrick's Day. People were less likely to notice his irregular size and shape when they were good and drunk. But this was an emergency. He'd just have to risk being seen by the sober folks and hope for the best. His short, hurried strides took him to the center of town, where the Get and Gobble grocery store glowed like a fairy house. Once inside, he ignored the many gasps and smattering of screams and went straight to the produce section. Belatedly realizing he'd forgot a bag, he pulled his worn and filthy tunic over his head, tied off one end, and filled it with fruits and vegetables and tubers and grains. The seams of the sack groaned as he settled it over his mottled back and tested its weight. Politely stepping over a few patrons that had fainted when he took his shirt off, he tossed a handful of gold coins to the terrified human behind Register 4 and headed back into the night. The potluck's planning had given him a good idea of where all the meal's ingredients would come from. It was a wide area with long distances in between, and timing would be tricky. He chewed on another nail, unsure of where to start. "Need help?" Pebble asked, his voice jolting Melvin. "It's not right how they treat you," his friend added. "Not right at all. And we toss rocks at other people, not at each other. And who knows? Baby jackfruit is tasty. Never know until you try, right? The Trollger's sack fell to the ground as he swept up his friend in a mighty hug. After setting the gnome down, he squatted in close and explained his plan. But the disguises need to be really good, Melvin finished. You think you can do it? Pebble scoffed. I do costumes for our annual Halloween pageant. Old Corey even said that I was good enough to work on Broadway. He'd know, too. He used to toss rocks up in the Catskills and went to New York City all the time. After divvying up the assorted food that Melvin had purchased, the two friends raced off in opposite directions. Pebble would see to the people food. Teenagers, beautiful ladies, fishermen, things like that. Melvin would see to the animals and that plump newborn. The chickens were closest. They raised a terrified ruckus when he bent his way into their coop, but Melvin was able to shoo them out without too much effort. Once the henhouse was clear, he placed a ripe cantaloupe where each bird had been. Before setting each melon into the straw, he gave it a lick with his oozing tongue and smushed some fallen feathers all over it. As an added touch, he wiggled little russet potatoes beneath each one. Squinting, he appraised his handiwork. A henhouse full of plump hens, each with its own pile of little eggs. Tastes like chicken, he chortled, skipping to the next farmstead down the road. Melvin figured Jorge would definitely want something to suck on, so after tossing a startled goat over a split-rail fence, he braced a watermelon up on 4 branches and stuck a large heirloom tomato on one end to serve as a head. The silhouette was about right, but to be safe, he put a small bell around the tomato. A flip of his finger set the bell clanking, the sound accompanying Melvin's delighted giggle. Moving as quickly as his mismatched legs would carry him, he ran for the farm with the newborn. The farmstead was a tidy, single-story house beside a long, bare field. Trees had been felled in a wide ring around the house, leaving little cover to hide the terrifying monster. Melvin tapped a hairy mole on his chin and considered his options. Neither trolls nor ogres are really built for stealth, so Melvin took the direct approach. Take your baby and go far away, he advised the terrified couple that answered his knocks on the front door. He swore he could still hear their screams over the fading rumble of a car engine as he hastened to the baby's empty room. With loving care, he pulled his prized jackfruit from the shirt sack, swaddled it in a soft blanket, snuggled a white bonnet on top, and settled it into the crib. When he heard the front door open, Melvin dove into the closet. Breathing as quietly as he could, the Trollger waited. Careful footsteps, the rocking of a crib, an eager gasp, and the soft thud of a door closing again reached his ears, and then all was quiet. That was too close, he panted, stepping free of the closet's confines and racing from the house. He'd just made it to the tree line when he heard the Gumbaroo's signature laugh. Gum had promised deer, so Melvin rummaged through his sack and settled on 3 large brown squash with asparagus and stalks of celery. Moving as quietly as a half-troll, half-ogre could, he placed the squash with their vegetable antlers in a small grouping near a large blackberry bush and melted back into the shadows. A moment later, Gum ambled through the brush, exclaimed with delight, scooped up the sleeping deer, and ambled away, still chuckling. With a worried sigh, Melvin plucked an apple from the bottom of the sack and considered the now empty shirt. Untying the knot, he pulled it back over his hairy shoulders, smoothed his lanky hair, and gulped. Dinner time, he decided, and set off through the woods. When Melvin reached the clearing, he found Pebble already there, nervously tossing a rock from hand to hand. Each of the gathered monsters was laying out their portion of the feast, alternately complimenting their neighbors' contributions and bragging about their own. To Melvin's delight, the gnome had done excellent work. He must have raided a local clothing store after parting ways. The stalks of corn and bundles of kale and heads of lettuce with olive eyes and orange wedge ears and mushroom noses and cherry tomato lips were dressed so convincingly that even Melvin couldn't tell they weren't teens or young ladies or fishermen. As the Trollger approached and a myriad of eyes turned his way, Melvin smiled shyly, drew the shiny red apple from a pocket, set it in the center of the spread, and gave a lopsided shrug. After the resulting silence had stretched well past awkward, the hodag cleared its throat. Friends, we gather to give thanks to the night and to celebrate her winter solstice. Thank you all for the wonderful feast you've helped to prepare. Well, everyone except for Melvin. Now, I think I speak for all of us when I say, let's eat. The Trollger and his gnome friend stood frozen as the collection of nightmares made their way around the piles of food, pulling and rending and chomping and chewing. They exchanged a nervous glance as the revelers sucked and swallowed and gobbled and belched. And when the hodag pronounced that the farmer's newborn babe was the tastiest flesh he had ever had the pleasure of trying, Pebble winked, and a smile split Melvin's face from ear to ear. So yeah, that's a little more in line with the stuff I normally write. All right, so I didn't check the time.
It's about 7:25.
So one more story, and then we go drink beer? Yes. Sure. Alright, so this last story, I need to preface this a bit. This was a lot of fun. There's a local group called Six Emperor Servant, and back in 2012 they did their first what they called Book in a Day. So they invited authors to show up at a bookstore. They gave them 3 prompts and 24 hours to write a story involving those prompts. They set some ditches for the story, so it had to be spec fiction in a certain vein, and they had a ton of fun doing it. So this is their first book in a day. This is volume 2. We met at Majors and Quinn. We got the rules. We got 3 prompts. We had to use a balloon sword instead of a real sword. We had to have sage advice from a non-human thing. And we had to have a line of dialogue. Ufta, this lutefisk is limp. And then we had 24 hours. If you guys know Uptown, I went to the Uptown, which is a bar arcade full of video games and beer, and pulled up my laptop, ordered a pint, started writing, played some video games, wrote some more, and came up with kind of a Twilight Zone-y sort of story. They got about 90 submissions. They picked their favorite 15, and then the authors got to come back and read their stories for a crowd. And then they had online voting for a few weeks, and then the top 10 made it into the anthology. So I was super excited. I had never tried to write a piece of fiction that quickly before, and if I have to again, it will definitely involve beer and video games. But yeah, so this is my story, Forever Portend, from Spontaneous Combustion, Volume 2. Purple, blue, red, orange, gray, yellow, even green. Strangely, no black. That is quite the shiner. You should see the other guy, I muttered and turned away from the mirror. I mean it too. You should really start seeing that guy. Why hang around with a wimp like me? Jan clicked her tongue in a way that only she seemed capable of and raised an eyebrow. Why indeed? It must be the allure of your unshakable self-esteem. She smiled. Now sit. The toilet seat was uncomfortable, but the bathroom had the best light. Jan poked at the swelling around my eye. I tried not to groan and then gave up the fight. I'd already proven I wasn't a tough guy. Jan hummed. I don't think anything is broken. My good eye must have looked dubious because she explained, well, you didn't just pass out from pain, ergo, no fractures? Stay put. I'll get some peas. I have peas? I hadn't bought peas. You do now. They're for a casserole, she answered from the kitchen. You make casserole? The throbbing in my skull made it hard to reconcile my girlfriend with someone that made casserole. I heard the freezer open and close, and Jan was in front of me again. This'll hurt for a sec, she cautioned. She wasn't kidding. Frozen peas are hard little suckers, and smushing a bagful against a swollen bruise ain't fun. But she was also right. It only hurt for a second or two before the deep cold started to work its way into the tissue. I placed my hand on the bag, freeing Jan to sit on the tub's edge. It was very gallant of you. Gallant. There's a pretty word. A word that nicely glossed over the fact that I just had my ass handed to me by a carny. And not even one of those scary carnies, the ones that are missing fingers or have ropey scars winding down their cheeks. The guy had been half my size, no scars that I could see, and at least one of his hands still had all of its fingers. He was quicker than he looked. Funny how ruminating leads to rationalizing. Stronger, too. I'm guessing it was drugs. Jan patted my knee. I'm sure. Total roid rage. Now stop beating yourself up. No need, I agreed. Someone literally beat me to it. Her mouth managed something between a quirky grin and sympathetic pout. She leaned in past my arm and the lumpy bag of frozen peas and kissed me gently on the cheek. Rising, she hooked a thumb toward the living room, a question hanging unspoken between us. Sure, I said, convincing myself that I wasn't about to throw up. I'm good. What do you want to watch? If I'd known that would be the last time I'd see her alive, I might have said something a little more profound. The carnival had been the perfect idea. Minnesota was enjoying an unseasonably warm October, and I was looking for better-than-average Halloween date ideas. The bar scene would have been crowded and loud, not really ideal for a guy that wanted to actually talk to a girl. I thought about staying in and handing out candy to the neighborhood trick-or-treaters, but then worried it might be too domestic for the still-new relationship. You think too much, Steve commented. I think single guys shouldn't critique not single guys. Steve shrugged and finished adding cream to his coffee. Whatever. Hey, what about that? My eyes followed his finger and landed on a torn flyer tacked to the cafe's community board. A shiver raced down my spine and a few drops of coffee burned my thumb. Oh, hot. Pass me a lid. Scalding liquid secured, I leaned into the board, and for a moment, I felt like the whole world had tilted and I was sliding toward the odd scrap of paper hanging from a lime green pushpin. The sensation passed before I could give it much thought, replaced by a warm certainty. A carnival. Perfect. That's got to be old. Steve had stepped up beside me. Hell, looks like it was printed ages ago. Sorry, dude. He was wrong, though. I knew it. I mean, not about the looking old part. I mean, the flyer did look like it had crawled out of a long-distant past. Yellowing paper with frayed edges, ink so faded that the reds and greens were more rust and moss, and finely penned words like quite fine and appetency and merriment of the highest sort danced around descriptions of attractions, bringing to mind a mustache vested in bowler-top barker perched atop an empty apple crate. But the carnival, a one-night-only affair, was dated for this Halloween. No question. Jan had been cautiously optimistic despite my coyly refusing to share our destination. We left a little before sunset and followed my scrawled directions past the city limits, the suburb limits, and what I quickly became convinced were the edges of any map. Endless fields of harvested corn stretched in every direction. While we drove, gold and red and fiery orange drained from the horizon like a slow outgoing tide, while darker blues and finally a star-spangled black blanketed the sky. I was glad for the cloudless night. The beautiful sunset had distracted Jan from pestering me with questions about where we were going and thinly veiled warnings about the price of disappointment. She was about to dig in again when we both saw the glow on the horizon. It warmed as we approached, like someone turning up the dimmer on a giant tungsten bulb. Suspense. I guess that's it, I observed with a smile. What starts with C and rhymes with Arnival? I asked. Are you serious? My certainty faltered and I glanced her way. When I saw the lights reflected in her eager eyes, I mentally kissed Steve full in the mouth for pushing me to take her here. This was a really good idea. Turning off the main road, I followed a couple of dirt ruts and joined a small sea of parked cars. Hand in hand, we walked through the browning grass toward a large hand-painted sign proclaiming the entrance. Large tents ringed a clearing packed with countless stalls. Lights were strung from tall poles bathing everything in a buttery yellow. On the far side, a colorful Ferris wheel lorded regally over a small midway. Laughter and screams blended with an Ernest Calliope's jaunty tune, and cries of 2 for $1, 5 for 2, and step up, draw near, strange wonders are here, and ride the tilt-a-whirl, more twists and twirls than Rapunzel's curls, pulled our attention in every possible direction. Scents of old wood and turned soil and kerosene filled my nostrils, and pie, baked apple pie. Jan and I made our way through row upon row of wooden stalls, each covered with its own brightly striped canvas. I threw rings at glass bottles and won her a stuffed bear. She impressed the hell out of me when she swung a mallet and won me a gorilla figurine. A duel with balloon swords ended in a draw when our weapons popped and we both yelped. And the tent that promised strange wonders delivered in spectacular fashion. We were about halfway through a second slice of pie under a melting scoop of real vanilla ice cream when she saw the antique love tester. The contraption looked like a tall wardrobe cased in dark cherry wood, daunting, daring, and, for Jan at least, irresistible. You know I love you, I pleaded, and I know you love me too. This, I waved a hand at the towering wooden box, this really isn't necessary. Jan was having none of my excuses. I felt stupid for my trepidation, but misgivings tugged and twined in my gut. But it was only a quarter, so I fished one from my pocket and slid it into the slot. Ladies first, I said, not asking. Jan rose to the challenge and stepped up to the machine. With a mischievous grin, she read the gilded instructions painted on its front. Love unmeasured, a fistful of air. Prove your love to your darling most fair. Keep the handles in hand, your love's face in your heart. Speak their name, and then you may start. 1 through 5, your love is a lie. 6 through 10, you're more than friends. 11, 12, passion swells. If 13 alights, you've reached true love's height. Jan pulled me in for a long kiss, winked and grabbed the copper handles. Nathan, she whispered my name into a night suddenly gone quiet. A faint hum raised the hair on my arms and a small bulb near her hand glowed to life. The one above it lit, and then the next. Each clear glass bulb was set in a painted red heart, each heart larger than the one before. The 13th bulb's heart was the largest of all, its heavily lacquered finish wetly reflecting the glowing light. In mere moments, the topmost bulb lit up like a small sun, but it was nothing compared to the light of Jan's smile. Whirs and clicks filled the air, the light bulbs went dark, and a small slip of paper slid out from a copper-framed slot. Some hearts bruise, others break, some are not for one to take. Yours is full, stem to stern, a love that only one may earn. Well, 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 Jan challenged after reading the slip out loud. Seems like the bar has been set. No pressure, I complained, wiping my palms on my jeans and sliding a fresh quarter into the contraption. I gripped the handles, and I boldly spoke her name. A bulb flickered to life. Another. A third. You normally take this long to get it up? Jan asked after clicking her tongue. I would have said something clever, but I was too busy holding my breath. 4 lights, then 5. 6 through 9 lit up quickly enough, but the 10th took its own sweet time. I was about to release my grip and face my fate when the 11th bulb began to glow. And 12. Tentative at first, but then burning more steadily. 13. See? I hollered triumphant. I relaxed my cramped hands and the lights went dark. A few whirs and clicks later, my own love assessment slid out from the copper slot. At least, that's what it was supposed to be. I read the slip of paper, my brow furrowed, and the world seemed to go far away. For a moment, it felt like everything tilted again, like it did when I first saw that flyer on the bulletin board. Aren't you going to read it to me? Jan asked. Jan's voice snapped me back to myself. After a second review of the finely printed script, it still didn't make a lot of sense. I decided that sharing the confusing message wasn't really a good idea and improvised instead. A worthy companion, a beautiful sight, a love for the ages you found this night, I managed. With a quick sleight of hand, I made as if to push the paper into my back pocket, but let the crumpled page fall unnoticed to the ground instead. Jan pressed up against me. Damn right you have. And I'm the luckiest guy in the world, I agreed. I squeezed her tight, hoping that she wouldn't notice my trembles. Now, who wants to go on some rides? The carnival's midway was impressive in a quaint sort of way. The Ferris wheel turned slowly, willing the night to last forever. A swan-shaped gondola on a tall pendulum swung back and forth. Children and adults alike rode burlap sacks down a wavy slide. Jan and I wove back and forth, unsure of which ride to try first. Hey there, you two, come on for a spin, a carny called, his Norwegian accent thick as an old tree trunk. Hey there, you two, come on for a spin. Oofta, I joked quietly, earning a chastising squeeze of our interlocked fingers. We approached, Jan admiring the old-fashioned tilt-a-whirl, me fishing for dollars in my wallet. Come on, come on. She spins and spins like leaves in the wind, the carny promised, blue eyes following Jan. No better ride, not swings nor slides. Lass like you sure likes to ride, yeah? Something in the way he said sure likes to ride narrowed my eyes. Jan drew up short the carny, but smiled through the innuendo. Who doesn't? She laughed. Tilt-a-whirls are classic. More twists and twirls than Rapunzel's curls, the carny agreed, looking at everything but Jan's eyes. Something quickly approaching anger boiled under my skin. Hey, buddy, keep your eyes on the ride, I said, shoving $2 in his flat farm boy face. And unbelievably, the carny winked, actually winked, at Jan. Sure, that's what I was doing, don't you know? To her credit, she simply rolled her eyes and turned toward the waiting carriage. I thought that'd be the end of it, until she tossed a parting comment over her shoulder, punctuated with a twerk. This ride is reserved for real men. I turned a smug smile toward the carny, but it fell from my face when I saw the expression on his. Jan's barb must have really hit a nerve. "Who, this one?" he asked, tilting his head toward me. "Hoofta, this lutefisk is limp." He scoffed at the derisive wave in my direction. "Asshole!" I yelled and shoved the carny hard in the chest. There was a Norwegian curse, a flying fist, a burst of light, a lot of pain, and hard-packed dirt rushing up to meet the back of my head. Jan drove us home, angrily complaining the entire way about awful people and calling the management and suing. I just sulked in the passenger seat, one eye swelling shut, the other staring at the bleak and barren fields. The evening was ruined. A brilliant and romantic evening brought to a screeching halt when I'd had my ass handed to me by a carny. Things couldn't get any worse. There's no explaining how it feels to die. 1 minute, you're sitting in your bathroom with a bag of frozen peas smushed to your face, and the next, well, I couldn't see. Or if I could, I could only see black. I couldn't smell, I couldn't feel, but oddly I could hear. Laughter, calliope music, the creaking of wheels, the passing of countless feet. Disoriented, I tried to make sense of what had happened. The setting sun, apple pie. I'd been hurt. Frozen peas. Was someone making casserole? Jan. I remember Jan. The way one side of her smile would lift higher than the other. Her chaotically artful approach to dressing, the inexplicably unique way that she could click her tongue, the way she said my name. Jordan. But that wasn't my name. That was someone else's name, spoken by a woman's voice that wasn't Jan's. With that realization came another. I could feel something. It started as a warm electric glow somewhere down below and worked its way up. 1 through 5, your love is a lie. 6 through 10, you're more than friends. Some hearts join for all their days, others meet and soon part ways. Yours is steady, selfless, true, but there may be another for you. Why had I said that? My voice sounded strange, that the sensation suddenly stopped and I fell again into mute darkness. Before I could even begin to understand what was happening, a woman's voice squealed in surprise. Liar! This thing lies! Babe, trust me, you're the only one. Don't believe this dumb machine. A man laughing, then, yeah, it's a jerk. Hey, don't litter. Wait, someone else tossed their note down too. A pause and then, you can see why. Really? What's it say? Leave, and joy will light your way, your heart to share for all your days. Stay, and strife will be your end. Other hearts forever portend. See? Weird. I heard the footsteps fade and others return, and then another voice. Oh, what the hell? It's only a quarter.